Good morning, I'm Adam Sexton. On Capitol Hill last week, Congress signed off on an $8.3 billion coronavirus response package. One of the votes in favor was Congressman Chris Pappas, and he joins us this morning to discuss that and other issues. Thanks for being here, Congressman.
Good morning. Great to be with you.
So it's interesting to see on social media, in public, people don't know how to react, really, to the coronavirus. So you've been there on these briefings. You've got a lot of information. How concerned should people be?
Well, I think we need to continue to listen to the messages that we're getting from public health officials here in New Hampshire, at the CDC, at the federal level, to make sure that we're protecting ourselves and taking those steps in our own communities to keep people safe. That's why the approval of these funds was so critical, to make sure that the response effort can continue to move forward, that we're doing the development necessary to get a vaccine out, which is going to take many months and probably greater than a year to make sure that gets out to individuals, to make sure that testing is more widely available for our state labs and for medical facilities, so that we get an earlier indication of who's at risk and how we can protect the population. But the mitigation and containment efforts that are underway here in New Hampshire are going well so far. There are protocols that our hospitals, that state public health officials are following, and so we need to continue to take our cues from those folks who have done this work and who can provide that calm, cool, and collected voice that we all need at this point in time. So the funding is important to back that up, but let's continue to let the public health officials lead this effort.
Some attention is focused on this Dartmouth-connected individual who was asked to self-quarantine and then went out in the public anyway. Isn't that a good example here of no matter how right the government gets it, and of course it's, you know, a mixed bag with that one. Sometimes mistakes are made, sometimes things are done well. But no matter how well the government does, this is a free society and people are going to do what they're going to do. It's not China, where they can just lock down their whole system and try to stop this thing.
That's right, and that's why we all need to understand how we can protect ourselves. And I think, you know, we need to be treating this like we do any influenza season, where you're covering your cough, you're staying home when you're sick, you're sanitizing surfaces, practicing good hand washing techniques. That's all really valuable to, you know, prevent the spread of coronavirus. We've seen a couple of cases identified here in New Hampshire. We want to prevent the sort of community spread that we've seen in other parts of the country, including Washington State, where we've had some individuals at a long-term care facility become infected and actually die from this disease. So we have 100,000 individuals across the planet that have been infected with coronavirus. We're probably just seeing the early stages of it here in the United States. But what we do during this time frame is going to be absolutely pivotal to determine whether or not this becomes an epidemic here, or whether we're able to you know, prevent the spread and save lives.
How would you rate President Trump's response? Some are saying his words are not helping when he says that, or suggests that you might be able to go to work, or a lot of people have this and don't know it, says that a vaccine is imminent. What do you think about that?
Well, now is not the time for politics, and clearly that's the message that members of Congress have been trying to send, that we need to trust the public health officials that have been presenting really rational information to the American public. So we need to continue to listen to Dr. Fauci and those who Vice President Pence has convened to lead the response effort, and I think they're doing a good job. We've had some briefings in Washington last week in the run-up to approve the funding that we did, and you know, I think there's widespread trust in the individuals at CDC and NIH who have been leading this effort. So those are the individuals we need to continue to take our cues from.
Rewinding a little bit here, we haven't had you back on set here since you voted to impeach the president back in December. So take us through that decision again, and as you head into November in 2020, how do you explain to voters your decision, and how a lot of people see this in a political light, and you're saying this was, you know, about principle. So how do you untie that knot as you head towards November?
It was a really tough decision, and I certainly didn't run for Congress to impeach a president. I didn't run to, you know, provide this sort of vote that we had to take in the House. I ran to try to make a difference for the people of this state, and we'll continue to be focused on how we can do that. And there's so many outstanding issues where we need to continue to see progress, whether it's prescription drugs or infrastructure or surprise medical billing. And so I hope we can see some resolution to some of those issues. But look, when you come into office, you take an oath. You swear an oath to the Constitution of the United States. There's nothing more solemn than that. And I ran for office saying that I would stand up to anyone in my party or the president if they're wrong for New Hampshire. And I thought he went well beyond the bounds of what was appropriate for his job. He used his own personal political interest when it came to our national security and what was happening with respect to Ukraine. And that's beyond the bounds of what his constitutional office allows him to do. So we need some bright lines with respect to our government officials. That's why we took the step we did in the House. It was a solemn decision that no one wanted to make, but I think going forward, we always need to have the system of checks and balances that our founders intended. And if we don't, frankly, then we don't have a democracy anymore.
So your contention is no politics involved here whatsoever?
I didn't think about the political ramifications of this at all, whether there was a benefit or a downfall for me engaging in this kind of a decision. This was a really solemn decision that was only made with the facts in mind and with my constitutional oath in mind.
So if a First District voter comes up to you in the next few months and asks, what have you done to work with President Trump rather than against him, what would you say?
We've worked on a number of issues. Past USMCA, a groundbreaking trade deal that was made better by the work that House leadership helped do with our labor community. And we got a deal in the end that protects American workers, supports our small businesses and our farmers, and is really going to be a hallmark of this term. So I think that's one thing you can point to. The President has talked a lot about infrastructure. We feel really good about the framework that was announced by our committee this past spring. This past month. And we're hoping this spring that we're going to get a deal through the House that's going to invest more in our roads and bridges and water infrastructure and broadband and all the things that can continue to support our economy moving forward. I've worked with his administration on veterans issues, and there are some serious concerns with regard to community care and our providers being paid in a timely fashion in New Hampshire. And if we're looking to serve our vets moving forward, we need to make sure that the bill is paid. So there are many ways that we're working with this administration, and I think that we all have to look for ways that we can dial back the political rhetoric, find that sense of common purpose. Ultimately, our constituents are depending on us to do that, and there are so many urgent needs that frankly can't wait until after the next election.
You mentioned the last month it felt a lot like a year, at least on the Democratic primary side of things. Explain, why didn't you make an endorsement in the First in the Nation primary?
Well, I really, purposely wanted to make sure that the New Hampshire voters were out in front of this process, that they were leading, that they were being able to assess these candidates and make their own conclusions about where to go. And I think they did that. And I think we see this process continue to move on. The field has consolidated quite a bit since New Hampshire. It appears it's down to 2 candidates now between Senator Sanders and Vice President Biden. And so I think New Hampshire played an important role in assessing the field, shaping the terms of the national debate, and allowing the voters here to have their say. So for me, this wasn't about trying to weigh in to direct voters in a certain direction. I think that they arrived at a good conclusion, and it's up to us to figure out how we can bring this all together when it's over. I went through this process in 2018 in a congressional race with 11 Democrats running in a primary. It was divisive at some times, but we understood that the differences between us on the issues were quite small when compared to the differences with President Trump on issues like health care or the environment or gun violence. So we know what's at stake here as Democrats, and I think we want to unite at the end of the day. And I think having individuals who haven't weighed in this contest, like me, I'm going to be working to help repair any of the bad feelings from this primary and bring people together.
So is it safe to say now you're on Team Biden, or you're still going to wait until this is absolutely over?
The voters of New Hampshire have already weighed in, so I don't feel the need to make an endorsement at this point in time. But I'll say that we should really look to the example of 2018. Those of us who ran in tough districts talked about issues that were important to us, to our families, and to our communities, those kitchen table issues. And we look for ways to bring people together and to speak to voters in the middle, especially those independent voters who feel alienated by our politics today. And I think regardless of who the nominee is, they need to build a big tent. They need to be bringing people in. And I think we need to get past the sort of divisive politics of us versus them. We need a unifier, and we need someone who can help heal this country.
Back on the policy side of things, we see the president continuing to use defense funds to build the border wall on the southern border with Mexico. Is there still a threat here potentially to the shipyard as we see Pentagon money moving around in this fashion?
Well, unfortunately, I think there will always be a threat if this president wants to unconstitutionally take money away from projects that have been appropriated by Congress. And we need to continue to stand up for that, fight it in the halls of Congress, but also in court if we have to. These are projects that are vitally important, not just to the economy of New Hampshire, but to the national security of this country. And so we need to make sure that while these projects were spared in the last round, that they continue to get the type of support they need to be be able to go forward in a timely fashion. These are projects at the shipyard are going to add incredible capacity to repair and rehabilitate our submarine fleet, which is just so vital to this country. And
you're co-sponsoring a new bill that is coming from Congresswoman Custer's office, looking at trying to get some more money out there for commuter rail. Eventually, I'm guessing you want to get this to Manchester, but how do you make this work in a way? I mean, you look to the south, and the problems with the T is just every day, almost. How do you make a functional system come into New Hampshire if you're going to do this, so taxpayers know they're getting the best bang for their dollar?
Sure. Well, part of what the state is looking at right now is what kind of design do we put together for this project? What does the financial plan look like? And the key component of this will be what federal dollars are available to make this work. So Congresswoman Custer and I and our senators from New Hampshire as well are looking at the conversation around surface transportation and how we ensure that there are funds available there for this project once it's ready to go. So that's absolutely a critical component of it. But I think that, you know, New Hampshire has a way of doing things, and we need to be able to put together a New Hampshire solution on this. So while if we're looking at a commuter rail solution, MBTA will be part of the equation, there are other options on the table too. Intercity rail service with Amtrak was an idea that was floated and studied in the past too. So let's look at all the different range of opportunities we have with respect to passenger rail connections in New Hampshire and evaluate them. And you know, that can be one thing we consider in the process.
All right, Congressman Chris Pappas, thanks for joining us on Close Up.
Thank you very much.